This will not be a technical presentation. It's just simply relating my experiences. So let's get started and talk about it. What is DX and why do you chase it? Well, as Hoop just said, there is a thrill that you're searching for something that's not there all the time, and that you can actually make your little signal go there, and they acknowledge you, and you get confirmation of it, and move on to the next one. But so a DX equal a contact with an entity. Notice I say entity, not country. It's an entity because some entities are part of a country or a protectorate of a country, whatever. But the powers that be in the radio world have decided that there are entities and that you're going to make a contact with them and get it confirmed. And you can then qualify for some or various awards that are available. Other than your home country, and you need to be in your home country or entity when you make this contact in order for it to count toward your award. In other words, I can't go down to the Caribbean for a contest weekend and rent a powerful station and sit in Aruba like P40X does every contest. You can contact P40X, I think that's the call sign. And they're there and they make all these contacts. But if they live in the United States, those don't count toward awards for them personally. It counts for that contest, of course, but not for DX. So it must be made from your home country, and currently there are 340 recognized entities. Now that number can change from time to time. And currently with 340, you must have confirmed contacts within 9 of that total. So 331 or more to qualify for DXCC honor roll. DXCC honor roll. It's 331. Now when you see my statistics later on in the presentation, you'll see I had 2 more. I have 333. But 2 of them, in the middle of me doing all this, became non-recognizable. So they didn't count when I got ready to file. I think that should be changed, Ed. You're on the board. Change that. Because I would have been there a long time ago. But that's not fair. It looks like if they were a valid entity when you made the contact, you ought to get credit for it. But all right, so the draw. Challenge, equipment, antennas. You may live in a very limited ability to put up antennas. You may be totally limited like Cliff is by only running 3 watts. That's a real handicap. But people get joy of doing that. Cliff, what joy gives? I don't know. But so if you live in a very limited antenna area, you probably want a little more power than 3 watts to give you a fair shake. But we won't talk about that. Operating skills. In order to get to that 340 or 331 as I did, you probably need to know a little CW. You need to know how to do sideband. Digital would be a big help because some DXpeditions, you may only hear them on CW. You may only hear them on digital. They may not be working. And I'll tell you about the one that got me over the hump, 331. He was on for about 10 or 12 days and he was operating by himself. And he did almost totally digital FT8. He did a little bit of CW, but not much. So popular goals, you can do 100 countries. You can do worked all states. You can do 100 countries on multiple modes. You can do 100 countries on multiple bands. You can do 5-band DXCC, 100 countries on 5 different bands. There are all kind of different goals within the DX world. So there you are, station snapshots. When I retired in 2002, I had a 2-meter 440 rig in my car. And I had not had a HF antenna up since we had lived in Birmingham back in the 1970s because of my moving around work. I just didn't have time for ham radio HF. But take a guess on who prodded me to get involved. Jack Cox. Okay, Jack, I know you're listening a couple of weeks from now when you view the video. It's your fault that got me started. So we do live in one of those deed-restricted areas, Ed, and I wish they would get rid of them. But it's easy to put up a little clandestine wire, and I had a little wire doublet. Some people would call it a V-beam. just a wire doublet fed with open wire feed line down to an ICOM AH4 tuner. And so with 100 watts, I started getting on. And then he says, well, I'm doing a contest this weekend. Why don't you get on the contest? So we started that. So I had a Pro 2, and we started doing RTTY contesting, RTTY, an old mode that used to be with a teletype, radio teletype. Now it became possible with a sound card. But guess what? That ever popular Tigertronic sound card did not exist in 2005. It had not been put on the market yet. And so what do? You use the sound card in your computer, but you needed an isolation transformer to keep the electrical stuff from interfering. So I had a little outboard isolation transformer that I bought from somebody on eBay and got on with RTTY. Several RTTY contests annually. ARRL has the one in early January, right after the first of the year. CQ has 2 a year, the worldwide and the WPX they call it. And almost every weekend some country or other, some organization has a RTTY contest somewhere. No internal sound cards, FT9. That's in there just see, that's a typo, that's FT8. FT9 for Tennessee graduates, but but FT9, FT8 had not been invented yet. Those guys up at Princeton, those PhDs, Nobel Prize winners, had not written the software to do FT8 yet. So you're stuck with RTTY, CW, sideband when I started. So I began working those contests. I got the bug, and I was headed toward worked all states, DXCC. I would be happy. So when you get to 100, you think, well, maybe I can go to 200. And then, so I was using N3FJP logging software and got on LOTW with ARRL. It just started that in the early 2000s, where you send your QSLs to the electronic database and match them up globally. So in many cases, when I'd make a contact, I had to send a paper card. And usually the first contact in a country or entity, I would send a card and try to get the paper confirmation. So then when I did need to have them checked at the ARRL for my award, I would have the cards. Because many people weren't on LOTW yet, but over the years it got better and better. So I did have QSL cards printed, sent them direct. Usually the first contact in a country, I tried to send the fastest way I could get the card. And that usually was in an envelope. I usually sent an envelope with a postage coming back, even to get sure, because a lot of these foreign operators cannot afford the postage. Then I got the real bug. I decided that I wanted to compete with people like Tom Neal, K4 X-Ray Golf, who had the big old setup out on Arno Road, 100-foot tower. I couldn't quite do that, but I had a piece of commercial property over in Melrose, which is near I-440 and Nolensville Road, and I put up an antenna at that commercial building I owned and put a remote station there. And some of y'all have heard that story till you're sick of it. But that's a little article I had in QST. And you see a picture of the station there with the ICOM 756 Pro 2 or 3, and the rotor control and the external watt meter, all of that could be accessed remotely. And in 2008, when I started on it, it was about 2006 trying to figure it out, all of those things had not been put together by anybody yet. And so I was kind of on the, as we would say, the bleeding edge of doing things. And so I got started. And the big thing was, up in that upper right corner of that picture, is the stepper 3-element beam. And it was 3 elements on any frequency above 20 meters, but 30 and 40 meters even, that center element became a folded dipole on 30 and 40. So you had a rotatable dipole on 30 and 40. You had a directional beam on everything 20 and above. That was, and it's 55 feet too. At about an 800-foot elevation, from the tower you could see all of Nashville. There was no obstructions. And remarkably, I had a pretty low noise level at that location as well, even though it was in a commercial area. So DX every day. You can make a DX contact at the strangest of times. You don't have to wait for a contest, but contests can help you get to your goals very quickly or more quickly. But you'll pop up and I'll tell you some war stories here in a few minutes. But you don't have to wait for a contest. Many of you still work, that's a 4-letter word. Those of us who were retired, I was already retired at this point. I was around a lot, even though I was still busy with other activities and wasn't just sitting around all day every day. But those of you who work can pick and choose your times. There may be some DX. You just have to learn to watch for it, be alert for it. So every day, contest. If you want to make lots of contests, quickly work the contest. There is a ham radio calendar, contest calendar that's online, and take a look at it. As I say, almost every weekend you can have an opportunity to make as many contests as you want. I was always a casual contest worker. I did not spend all weekend doing it. I had other things to do, obligations, but 2 hours to 3 hours or 4 hours here and there. I could pick and choose my windows and operate contests. Different modes, again, sideband, CW, and RIDI. Now, in a contest, you don't need to know a lot of CW. What you do need to know is, and with the help of software, you don't even have to know it really well, but listen, you get an ear for hearing your call sign. The computer, when you can type in the distant station's call sign, it'll send the call sign. So you call him. You send your call sign, W4GHD, send your call, and the computer can do that for you. So you don't have to send much at all, but when they respond, you need to hear them calling you, and then you hit the button to send the response. So see that if you can do that, again, you can pick up some entities you might not pick up otherwise because the CW gets through when nothing else does, even FT8. So the ARRL, CQ, various ham organizations sponsor these contests, and they're available to you at all times. Okay, what have I forgotten? And if you are a QRP aficionado, they do it too, and some of them do it quite successfully. And as I mentioned, I was casual. In a typical contest in a weekend, I would do 100 to 200 contacts. But even if you get on and do 25 or 50, and that's a real accomplishment. And you'll get to the 200 to 250 entities reasonably quickly. And then it becomes a little more difficult. So de-expeditions are your key to getting a lot of hard-to-get entities. And so even now, if you just think you might be interested, if you get accustomed to looking at information about the de-expeditions, what's coming up, who's active now, make those plans to try and work them, then you begin to, because somebody may not be there for another 2 or 3 years or 5 years at that particular remote location. Some of these islands, if you look on the map, particularly down south of South America, south of South Africa, they're in very isolated places in the middle of nowhere. There may not be anything there, or there might be a weather station, but those don't get on the air all the time. That's the key spot that I look at to keep up with de-expeditions, dxworld.net. And they tell you who's planning, and they even project out a year or so out as they learn about planned expeditions, and you keep up with them on that net. Propagation essentials. Knowing where the de-expedition is going to be and where you are, you may have limited windows when it's even possible. And our friend Tim back here and others have done presentations on propagation, but you need to learn to use the tools like and looking at the levels. We're still in relatively high levels of probability these days. we're in the sunspot cycle, but we're beginning to decline. We're on the downhill side of that 11-year cycle. Know where you are on that cycle. If you have a beam, learn to use short path, long path. Sometimes you can point the beam the opposite direction of the closest way to because propagation is coming in the back door. Use prediction tools like the Voice of America program, or there's another program I haven't used called Propagation. But happily, most of the de-expeditions these days will put on their website when they're going to be there, they give you a current propagation predictor on their website. You can plug in your grid number where you are, and it will then show you which bands give you the best probability at what time of the day. And so, when they're way out in the Pacific, sometimes you get up in the early mornings, sometimes you're up late at night, sometimes it's in the middle of the day, it can be any time. Watch the DX clusters, the websites that give you current spots. So many hams spot their contacts or who they're hearing. You can watch that. And again, it used to be that, when the call signs were by geographic area, if you saw a spot by a W4 call, you assumed it was in the southeast United States. Well, that's no longer true. But sometimes the good DX clusters will say what state they're from, so it gives you an indication. So if you see another spot from Tennessee, that gives you help. But if you see a spot in Florida, that might not be helpful to you because it could be somebody right on the water of the Gulf or the Atlantic Ocean, and being by a big body of salt water like that is a huge advantage. No propagation, no contacts. You're wasting your time. So you got to be a little bit, again, alert and understand what's going on in your area, what's possible where you are. How to be heard. Listen first. Don't prove that you're a rookie by jumping on top of the station. Listen. Figure it out. If they say they're working split, everybody knows what split is, right? You're going to be listening on one frequency, you're going to be transmitting on a different frequency. And so you've got to be able to work your radio. And invariably, when I had that remote station, sometimes when I would click, I'd be operating from my home, I'd click on turn on split, and I thought it was on, and I wasn't. So I got to where I would then turn the power down and listen. I had a radio at home, I'd listen for myself. Am I really on the frequency I thought I was transmitting? Because invariably, that can be embarrassing when you jump on top. Know the operator's rhythm. When you're listening for these de-expeditions, particular for sideband, they may say, I'm listening 5 to 20 up. Okay? They're not telling you exactly where they are. And so trying to figure out where they're listening, and they may be moving with every contact. They may start at 5 up and slowly work their way up 20. They may start at the top and work their way down. You've got to figure out how they're moving, the rhythm of how they're working. Now, had I had Tim and Cliff's flex radios in those days, again, they had not been invented yet, they can see the entire bandwidth of 20 meters. And guess what? All of a sudden they see spikes that appears 8 kilohertz up. They know that's where the people are calling him. They can see it on that display. I only could see 3 kilohertz because that's the bandwidth of my ICOM radio. So it was a bit of search and pounce in effect. And it's some luck. If you can figure out they're moving up, then I would go up maybe 2 kilohertz above where they just worked somebody and start calling there and wait for them to find me. Learn how to do split. I just talked about that. Where is he listening? Slide up or down just in front of him, because he may not make another contact exactly where he made that one. The worst case is they're hopping around. That's the guys you want to go, don't do that. because you can't find them. Just time your call. Again, you're sending Whiskey 4, Golf, Hotel, Delta. You don't say, ZS8W, this is W4GHD. He's not going to answer you. You're going to send your call sign, listen. If he says station with Delta, I assume that's me. There might be another station with Delta, but until he tells me he's talking to somebody else, I'm calling him again. But be polite. Phonetics, repeat things when you're asked, and then when he does call you. W4GHD, you're 5933 or whatever CQ zone he is, that's what he's going to tell you. And you're going to say, QSL, you're 59 Tennessee or 5904. He doesn't need any other weather reports. He doesn't want anything. He wants to move on and make another contact. That's contesting. If it's not working, change something. Move up, try it. Sometimes you get lucky and get it very quickly. Other times it takes a little work. And beware the frequency police. You're up, idiot, up. Move up, move up. Because there are people that spend their whole time glorying on the fact they can tell you what you're doing wrong. Okay. With sideband, turn your compression up a little bit. You want to have a little punch on your signal. You don't need it for it to sound high fidelity on trying to make a DX contact. CW, accuracy beats speed. You can use your RIT to tune in what you're hearing. Narrow filters. In FT8, FT4, this is where you're seeing so much activity now because how many of you are familiar with the fox and hound mode of FT8? I see most everybody, okay. That remote station can send 3 to 5 simultaneous signals on little slices. And knowing where to call him or this other station is important. But FT8's giving the ability for that DXpedition to make many more contacts than they would otherwise make using voice or CW. The Fox and Hounds, you want to put your call up above 1,000 on your waterfall. And we'll look at a screen here in a second. Operating split. Okay, that's what my screen looks like operating FT8. And if you look at the upper left, that's WJSTX software. And on that left side of that upper left, when the station's called, they scroll up on that all really fast, and it's hard to see them all. In the middle of that left side is my JT alert, which shows the calls in a grid and gives me a chance to see who's on there, okay, for normal operation. Look at the bottom, on my right, it's my log. Look at the bottom and the waterfall. And you see the little red horseshoe or the red bracket. What is that? That's where you're transmitting. The red is where you're transmitting. And the green is where you're receiving. So when you click to call a station, that green is going to move to where that station you're calling. Now, in this case, I'm sitting down there below 1,000 on my transmit. I'm operating split. When you set up your WJSTX, if you look at the settings page, down where it says split, it gives you 3 options. No split, rig, in other words, you're going to set your radio on split and tune the VFO for the split frequency, and something called fake it. I prefer another method which I use, and that is a manual method which I know where it's going to be and I don't have to fiddle with the radio. Up on the JSTX, there is a box called TX Hold. If you check that, it is going to freeze the transmit wherever that red horseshoe is. And you can move that red horseshoe by simply holding the shift button down and clicking over on the waterfall with your mouse, left mouse, and it'll set the transmit wherever you do. So I find wherever it looks like it's an empty spot on the waterfall, and I try to keep my transmit below about 2500, because you get too far toward the edge of your bandpass, you're not putting out as much transmit power as you would be in the middle. So for fox and hounds, I would keep that red bar to the right of 1000, because the fox is going to be below 1000. Now, will everybody do that? Again, so much in ham's radio is a gentle person's agreement that this is our standard operating procedure. But they ask that the hounds be to the right of 1000 and let the fox be below 1000. Any questions on that? Yeah, Paul?
Up where the yellow dot or the green dot where you're saying 2 meters or 20 meters, 40 meters. Just above that it says CQ only. Do you check mark that?
I don't bother checking it. No.
You were saying
Yeah, it will. Yeah, it will cut down. It'll cut down on what you're seeing. Yeah, I want to see everybody, because somebody may be in a QSO with somebody else. So I'll scan the list and see if I see an entity that's interesting. I may not have seen the CQ yet, so that's why I don't do it.
The other thing, and this is something I learned way too late, was on when you're sending out your own CQ, there's a check mark for CQ first. I had mine on none, and I could never understand why I never responded. And when they would call me back, I was going off to Never Never Land.
Yeah, there's so many options, but I've gotten accustomed to my method. I find it easier, and I can the fake it mode. The software just does it, and it would it'll just stick the transmit down in an area you might not want to be, on top of people. So,
I had a question.
yeah.
In terms of the etiquette for the FTA, when you try and get another station and they're calling CQ and you know they're in another QSO, how do you time when you try and catch them?
Okay, so if you want a station, you know they're making other contacts, you can wait till they call CQ again, but once you click on him, you'll begin to see everything that's happening on the frequency. Remember, you may not see both sides, but once he sends 73 to the other station, technically you should probably wait, because the other station is going to send him a 73, and then he's going to send CQ. So this thing is broken into 15-second increments. So, you know, every 15 seconds is a different part of the QSO. So if it's somebody I want, once I see him send 73, I'll go ahead and send it. He may not answer me on the first. He may wait and do this, listen for the other 73, but maybe he sees me calling him. He will, if he's copying me. He'll see my call sign, and I'll get in line with him. Any other questions on that? But the fox and hounds is really good. That's the great difference maker for those of you that have limited antennas. You've got a chance with FT8. Intel spotting, find DX, be ready. DX clusters we talked about. The reverse beacon network, if you're CW, telling them to have talked about that, you can send CQ with CW signal and see around the world who might be copying you, what areas. So again, that's an intelligence you put in the hopper to consider. If you're not being heard in that part of the world, then again, good luck. PSK Reporter does the same thing with your FT8 signal. If you send CQ on FT8 and go into PSK Reporter, you'll see around the world where you're being heard. Club log is indispensable these days because it has the online QSL reporting. That wasn't available when I started. Now you can go online. most of the expeditions do not want you to send them a QSL card. They don't want the cards. But you can go online and request a card from them, and you can also plug in your information about your contacts. It'll validate it's in their log before they even accept it. We talked about that, really. And then keep a simple watch list. When I got down to the last 3 or 4 or 5 I needed, app on your phone called Ham Alert. Plug in the entities you need. And of course, when you're starting, you need them all, so you don't need any alerts. But Ham Alert will help you, and that really helped me get over the finish line. QSLing Logbook of the World is fantastic, again, because if you have to wait until you go to a hamfest to get an official ARRL checker to look at your cards and approve them for the official awards, the online version of LTW does it great. The Bureau still operates, but it can be months or years before you get a response. That's ARRL sponsors that. You can send them to ARRL in bulk, and they send them around the world, but it is indeed very, very, very slow. If it's something you really need, do it direct or Logbook of the World. Keep your log. There's really no excuse for not having a log now with all the electronic tools you have on your computer, so that's pretty much. Budget for postage. When I was starting, I was sending stuff direct, and it could cost you $1 for international postage and $1 to get it back, sometimes $2 or more to get it back from the foreign country. So the online is the way to go for that. Some people are sending QSL cards to you by email, and they look beautiful. You get a PDF file and you can print it out of the QSL card. You don't even have to mail it. They don't count for awards. You've got to have a real card. So all the just as there's different aspects of you making contacts today with POTA, yada, in the DX. There are people that do islands on the air. You've got all kinds of worked all states, worked all zones. CQ awards are still around. I have the worked all zones. There are 40 around the world. It's a little easier to get than 331 entities. But CQ zones, all 40 zones. So modest station playback, pick your battles. Get on the air. Look at all the tools you have, be ready. If you've got noise is your enemy. You need to be able to hear weak stations. So try and do noise mitigation. Get you a one-to-one Balanin line with your antenna to cut out some of the interference, whatever you can do. Consult the experts. There are experts in this room in all aspects of this. Again, if you've got room, you could put up a sloper like Tom Neal used to do, even on 75 and 160. I've never had that room. If you can go park on the mountain for a weekend, you love to camp, find you a park with a high hill, put up a dipole. Resonant antennas are still, if you can put one up, are the best. That was the beauty of the stepper. It was resonant. So I had SWR less than 1.4 on every band. But if you got a G5RV, you've got a random wire, whatever it is, that's, as Jack would say, any antenna in the air is better than one in a box. And something that I did to get over the finish line. Consider renting time on a remote station. I closed my remote station in 2018. I had an opportunity to sell that property at a nice profit, so I did. I had to close it down, and I was sitting, and you'll see the stats in a few minutes, I still needed about 6 contacts. Well, for those 6, it meant pretty rare entities, and I probably was never going to get over the finish line in my lifetime with my little wire inverted L in my backyard. So I became a member of remotehamradio.com, $99 a year to be a member. You have access to a number of remote stations around the country. And then you pay by the minute to use it. Now, that can be expensive, but for just a few here and there, you can control the cost. But it got me on, and there may be you may have a friend that has a better station than you to consider going and working on from that location. Okay, listen, don't tune up on frequency. It just annoys you beyond measure when you got a de-expedition and somebody comes on and tunes up on the frequency that the de-ex station's calling them. That's what a dummy load's for. Or tune up 20 kilohertz where it's nobody's there. Tune up there. Don't tune up on frequency. If the DX is weak, again, play your card. Listen to the pattern. Log once you're sure. Yeah. Log once you're sure. And be the operator you would love to have from others. So there's some statistics. As you can see, when the remote station went on the air, so I'd had my wire for about 3 years at that point there at my house. So when my remote station went on, I was sitting at 140 countries or entities. I'd been able to work about that many with my little wire, and that's it, at low power. And I had a total of about 3,000 contacts. But notice the jump. I went from 140 entities to 250 in 2 years, end of 2010. Huge jump. And then from 2010 to 2015, I went up another, goes from 250 to 316 or 18. No, it's slowing down, isn't it? Because it's harder to get. I've gotten the easy ones. And you see it flattened off from 2015 all the way to 2018. It stayed at 328. Remember, 2 of those don't count because they became so I was really at 326. And it stayed there until just recently, in the last 18 months, I was able to get those last 5. So 333, 2 of which didn't count. 11, almost 12,000 total contacts in my log. Now, top lessons learned, you planning, know the propagation, log current. If you have room, multiple antennas can help, certainly. Broadband dipoles even. Practice your CW, digital modes, figure out the pileups, and make it fun. Let me tell you a story or two. JD1 BMM is an island called Minami Torishima. It sits about 1,000 miles southeast of Tokyo, and it is a Japanese protectorate or island. They own it. There is no permanent population there. There is a weather station. And this guy Masa is deployed there occasionally. So I just had the remote station up a while, and I'm having coffee with Jack, and I believe Jack was there, and Myron Manker, W4UR. Many of you will remember Myron. Tremendously successful CW operator. He got DXCC honor roll with a vertical and CW. It can be done. This is a hard entity to get. We're having coffee, and I said, well, I made a contact with some Japanese island over the weekend, JD1 BMM. And I thought Myron was going to fall off his chair because he was trying to get over the hump to 331, and that was one he needed, and I had just stumbled on him. But JD1 BMH is Ogasawara. It's about 600 miles, and there's a permanent population there of 2,500, and there is, I think, 1 or 2 operators. It's less difficult to get. It took me another 2 years to get it. So some of it's just luck. This one, very proud of this one. There is a Greek protectorate called Mount Athos. And so SV2 ASP/A is Mount Athos. If you can picture, you know where Greece is. It's in the Mediterranean, and it sits, but it has part of it that extends over the top, and there's a peninsula with 3 fingers that stick down into in the Mediterranean. And on one of those fingers is a monastery on Mount Athos. It is a monastic community, and they have a vow of silence. Now, a monk that's silent could do CW, of course, but how's he going to do sideband? I did him on sideband. the monks in their community decided that for safety purposes they would relieve one person of their vow of silence, let them get their amateur radio license, and operate in case of an emergency for the best of their community. And for many years, Monk Apollo was the designated person. I had the pleasure of seeing the community from the deck of a cruise ship in 2006. So I made this contact in 2012, I believe it is. Yeah, 2012. And so I was able to tell Monk Apollo that I had seen from the deck of the cruise ship his community. Now he hasn't since died, and they've now appointed somebody new, and I don't know his name, but there is one ham on the air from Mount Athos. I actually had one other contact, but it was a RIDI contact. Okay, this one was the one that got me over the hump, and that occurred late April, early May. Back in, I had not looked at the DX World Net for some time, and back around Christmas I looked at it, and lo and behold, there are two islands, Prince Edward and Marion Island, that sit about 1,000 miles south of South Africa, in the middle of nowhere. Above Antarctica, but below South Africa. And it said the expedition was going to be one guy was going down there. He's from Latvia, and he was going to be there in late April, early May. You know, when you go that far, surely you could attract somebody to go with you, right? You know, you got all this equipment, you got antennas, and he never did really provide much information about who if anybody, helped him. There is that weather station there, and there are some people there that rotate off on 3-month shifts. But sure enough, he did go. And he got on the air in late April, and through the remotehamradio.com, early on a Monday morning at about 5:15 a.m., I blew that boy out of the I put 500 watts into FTA, and I got him on the first call. I'm sorry, Cliff, I didn't mean to tell you that. I have totally disillusioned you, Cliff, but I wasn't going to wait anymore. But those remote ham radio has flex radios with those big amplifiers, and it just works. But station up in Maine is the physical location, and it stacked 7-element beams or something crazy. But okay, so I did 3 contacts, 20, 30, and 40, all FTA'd over a period of 3. Now, once you get one, it's really being a hog to get more. But that's the de-expedition game, is that people want to get more than one contact for insurance, whatever. But just for his statistics, he made about 30,000 contacts over that 10 to 12 day period that he operated, but only about 9,500 unique calls. So people like me took up part of his time. Okay. So that got me to the honor roll. Again, 331, 20 years, a lot of work, and $85 gets you a plaque. All right, any other questions? Yeah, that for those that can't hear Ed, he says, when you're sending cards direct, send it in a business-looking envelope. Don't put the call sign on the outside, because the Postal Service employees will steal money out of it. And then don't put money, usually. Again, the online request now is so wonderful to get the card, but if you can't do that and you send it direct, make it hard for the thieves to figure it out.